first activated for, and I can't remember which hurricane it was, but the first hurricane several years ago, you know, there was a year where we had a hurricane like at the end of September and at the end of October, beginning of October and end of October. So for that very first one where we had some pretty widespread devastation, that's when they activated the First Coast Relief Fund. And so it was one fund where businesses or individuals could contribute, and the dollars would be sent to nonprofit organizations that were providing food, providing water, or helping people with their immediate needs. The first time, so since then, it was only activated for hurricanes, natural disasters, and COVID. So then we had, last August, the racial terror shooting at the Dollar General in Grant Park. And very, very soon, like the next day, the fire department and Councilwoman Pittman had gotten together and they had established a fund for the victims' families. And so we made the decision that we were not going to activate the First Coast Relief Fund because that fund had already been established, and the purpose of the First Coast Relief Fund is to not compete. We didn't want to create any confusion or competition. So we did have companies come to us because the fire department is not a nonprofit organization. So a company could not contribute to that fund that was established and receive a tax deduction for their gift. So we had companies come to us and ask us to activate the First Coast Relief Fund. And they also said by that time, this was several days after the incident, they indicated that there were some GoFundMe pages that had been established for victims' families. And so they said, you know, we want our dollars to go toward the broader community, improving the community at large, not specific to families of victims. And the governor had also made the commitment that funding from the state was going to go to the families of the victims. So we activated the First Coast Relief Fund and we called it Healing Jacks to distinguish it between the dollars that are raised for hurricanes or COVID and the dollars that were raised in response to the racial terror shooting that took the lives of 3 people at the Dollar General. So what you see is this very first page is a timeline of what I just talked about. And so the founders of the First Coast Relief Fund identified that 20% of the dollars raised would go toward immediate needs specific to Grant Park and Newtown. And so there were people who reached out to people who work in those communities and people who live in those communities and asked them what they needed, what were some of the needs that they have. So this next page in the blue square shares the areas that were identified as being in need of additional funding. So we did 2 rounds of grants, and you'll see 23 organizations funded, $185,000. It's actually more than that now. It's over $200,000. It's $260,000. I apologize. This is an old PowerPoint. So it's $260,000 funded. And the next page is the name of the organizations that received money. And the criteria for an organization to receive funding is it had to have been operating already in Newtown and Grant Park prior to the shooting. So these are all organizations that have already been providing services in those 2 communities prior to that the shooting incident. So that's the short-term dollars. Those dollars have been fully granted out. We are getting reports from these organizations indicating what they've done, how many people have been served, with the funds that they received for the specific purposes that they received funding. Any questions about the short-term dollars? Okay, and you can ask me later if something occurs to you. All right, so then the next slide. So we started thinking about, okay, so what are we going to do long-term? Is there an opportunity for us to try to transform tragedy into something better for our community? And actually, Darnell Smith, who is the North Florida Market President for Florida Blue, asked us that question. So he reached out to myself, Parvez Ahmed, who was at the time Mayor Deegan's Chief Diversity Officer, and Isaiah Oliver, who is the President and CEO of the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida. So the three of us, he asked, is this an opportunity to do better for our community? And our answer was, well, it should be. We've got a lot of disparities and inequities in our community, and we should do better. So we broadened the circle a little bit, and we brought in nonprofit leaders and a faith leader who has leads a congregation in the Newtown Grant Park area, some business leaders, and we asked them, is this an opportunity for us to do better for our community? And they said, well, we're not certain, but it should be. And so then we broadened the circle further. So we had individual meetings with about 70 or 80 people, business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders, and they all said, yes, this should be an opportunity for us to do better for our community. So we formed a steering committee, and you can see the people on the steering committee are listed on one of these slides. And we came together in April of this year at CSX and talked about what does it mean? What does doing better for our community actually mean? And there was an artist, and so the artist was listening to the conversations that we had and drew this artwork that you have in your PowerPoint as well. And then the next slide is after that meeting, or during that meeting, we identified areas of focus. And you see these areas of focus listed here. Economic development, transportation and land use, health equity, education equity, and culture. Since then, we've added another one that's called Data Tank. So it's a way to measure progress. Are we actually improving the community or not? This culture committee developed the values and the behaviors that are printed on this slide. And then the steering committee came up with the mission and the vision that's on this slide. And so I want to just pause there and get your feedback on, what do you think about what's listed on this page as far as the mission statement, the vision statement, the areas of focus, as well as the values and the behaviors. Is there anything missing? Is there anything that you think is worded right or wrong? Just would really, I welcome your feedback.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can you expound on health equity, kind of what it entails?
Yes, thank you for that question. So Health Equities Committee has been looking at first access to healthy food, and they have also been talking about maternal health and infant health and mental health. So those are the areas that they've been talking about. They've got, and let me just make sure this is in here. Yes, good, okay. So for each of these areas of focus that are listed here, the following slides list for you what their, who's leading the work, and what their goals are, and the priority areas that they're looking at. That's health equity. Economic equity has been focused on workforce development and creating an innovation center specifically, and then also internships for students, transportation and land use. So, yes,
Do any of the economic development include the affordable housing?
what a great question. So this is the sixth presentation that I have done, and affordable housing often comes up as an area that's not included in here. And so we share that with the steering committee and also the leaders of each one of these committees. And there are a lot of people who are working on affordable housing in Jacksonville. United Way is one of those organizations that is partnering with many other organizations to work on affordable housing. I'm happy to talk with you about that, and I know Gloria is probably going to talk about that a little bit too. She's on the agenda as well. The city of Jacksonville is working on affordable housing, making funding available for a myriad of things: repairs, down payment assistance for people who want to own their homes, roofs. You may have heard about the roof funding. Now it's expended, I believe, so, and there wasn't a ton of money allocated for that, and it got expended pretty quickly. And also making funding available for companies that are building affordable housing, developers. So there's a lot going on in the affordable housing space, and you're right. I mean, it is a critical issue in Jacksonville, and it is something that we'll continue to talk about. And I really do think that there's just not a lot of understanding of what's happening, and it is also slow. It takes a long time to build an apartment complex, and so it's, it just doesn't happen immediately. But there are things that are happening, and we do need to figure out how we're going to make it move faster. Thank you for that. Yes?
Just to add to that, I think there needs to be some clarification about who's the recipient of affordable housing, because the residents are people in the city, aren't the city, developers.
So you mean for the funding that's being set aside? So there is some funding for developers for affordable housing. There is some funding for home ownership, and then there is some funding for repairs. So there was an attempt during this last budget, city council budget, to create a fund for developers to build more affordable housing. And that was taken out of the budget by city council, so that didn't pass. They're still trying to do that. There's still an effort to try and do that. So that is, it's also, that's multifamily and that's rental units is what that fund would be for. The city has funding for repairs for people who own their homes and they need some repairs done on those homes. The city has some funds for that, and they're constantly writing grant applications to get more funding in that area. And then the city has some funds for down payment assistance for people who are first-time home buyers and want to purchase a home. There are some dollars available for that as well. I don't know. I don't know the exact numbers of how much is in the development bucket versus the repair bucket versus the down payment assistance bucket. All right, so I'm not going to be able to tell you a number. Ennis may know. You know that? No. Here's what I think. I think that the majority of the funds that are available right now are going towards development, and they're going towards development of multifamily rental units.
Okay.
So United Way, so I mentioned United Way is doing some stuff in the affordable housing space. We were blessed. In 2020, we received funding from McKinsey Scott, $20 million. The most money that we've ever gotten at one time, ever. And our board, not this year, but last year, said, we're going to take 10 million of that and put it into affordable housing. And so we put together a task force that was co-chaired by Andre Wallace, who leads Jax USA. They're the arm of the chamber that tries to attract businesses to Jacksonville. And Mari Qureshi, who leads the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. And we had a number of people on that. And so they said, all right, here's how we think you need to spend the 10 million. 4 million is in repairs and heirs property for people who own their homes. How many of you know what heirs property is? Several of you do. Okay, so my shorthand version of it, and this work is led by LISC Jacksonville. They are the ones who brought this issue to our attention. Is we've got people who have been left a home from a relative who died, and it did not go through probate, it didn't go through the court system, so they don't have legal ownership of the home. They don't have title.
Right.
They are an heir, but they don't have legal title, and that creates a whole lot of problems, including if there is a hurricane, then they are not eligible